Hello everyone. Hope you're well on this beautiful afternoon in the UK. I think it's morning time in America and evening time in India and wherever else you are in the world. I hope you're having a good evening, good morning, good afternoon, or perhaps even late night. Just waiting for people to jump on. Just please tell me where you're from, who you are, so I can say hello to you. I'm all dressed up because I'm off out to a meeting in a short while. So hi Jovan, how are you? Good to see you, brother. I'm off out to a meeting, guys, but I thought it was very important to do this very quick. Hi Taj, good to see you. I thought it was very important to just do this very quick broadcast about the American elections. Jonathan, good to see you all the way from America. We've had this conversation already. Steve, good to see you too. I hope you're well. Jovan's from southeast London, looking sharp. Thank you very much. I'm off out to a meeting, Jovan. I like to dress in my jeans and t-shirts most of the time, but every now and then I go out of my house and have amazing meetings, and I'm meeting some incredible people later on today. Andy, my brother, how are you? Hope you're well, my friend. So guys, it's just a very short one today, really. So very rare for me. I'm one of these people. I don't do news. I don't do media much. I don't watch an awful lot of television. I'll watch a few films. I do love my films, but I tend not to watch what's going on in the world in that respect, because I don't want to get sucked up into it. But last night, quite strangely for me, I stayed up till very late, very late for me, in my bed, watching the American elections taking part and watching it evolve into the result that we've got this morning, that Donald Trump is now the president-elect. And what struck me in the build-up to the elections last night, and particularly what's come out of it this morning, you only have to trawl through your social media to see some horrendous messages that are being sent and emotions that are being expressed on social media. And similarly, I just flicked the news on for a few moments there, just to see what the response was from world leaders, and the response from world leaders is quite sort of different across the board, really. You have those who still are saying that they don't want Donald Trump to be president. You've got those who are quite ecstatic about about him becoming president, but then you've got those in the middle who are being very diplomatic, and you can tell that they are fighting with some inner emotions and ideals, and knowing that he perhaps doesn't fit those ideals at this moment in time, and they don't know what else to say, and they know that they need to say something, so they are being quite diplomatic. However, what's more important is the vitriolic stuff that I'm seeing on social media, and expressed in various interviews that we've seen in the United States. And it's sad, isn't it? That when we have these kind of events, and we had it in the UK, hi Jack, good to see you. We had it in the UK only a few months ago with a Brexit vote, and we had a similar kind of response across the United Kingdom and Europe regarding Brexit, and some really vitriolic statements, and statements that aimed at individuals rather than at ideology necessarily. So I find it very interesting. I have no firm views, to be honest. I don't like some of the stuff that I've seen Donald Trump say during the campaign. It has saddened me. It has made me wonder about what's going on and what kind of world we're living in, and how can somebody who holds those kind of views or expresses those kind of views be in the position that he is in. But the fact is, we've had a democratic election, and he's been elected by the majority to take power and become the president of the United States of America in January. But what I always find interesting is the response that we see from both within ourselves and other people. And from a psychological point of view, I always am intrigued as to why people are responding in the way that they respond. Now, here's the thing. In life, we have so many events. We've had 9/11, 7/7 in the UK, the Paris events and the atrocities in Paris, things going on in Syria, the tsunami several years ago, that affect human lives, that affects the world in some great scale. And we always have some kind of immediate emotional response, every single one of us. But here's the thing, each of our emotional responses from a psychological standpoint is geared by what personality preference we live our lives by. Now I'm going to explain in a simplistic way as possible, because psychology blows my mind. I guess that's what it's there to do. But I'm going to try and explain this in a most simple kind of way. So psychology is not new. Psychology goes back way before Jesus Christ was born. You know, it goes as far back as Hippocrates. Hippocrates was born in 460 BC. And he identified, and Hippocrates, for those of you that don't know, was essentially the first doctor. Hi, Matt, good to see you. Gillian, good to see you. Tim, good to see you. Was essentially the first doctor. And Hippocrates, as part of his work, he said that it was clear that each human being falls into one of 4 personality types. Now, he had some strange names for them, and I'm going to explain these names because it's important, because as the field of psychology evolves, this foundation is quite important. So he came up with 4 personality types, if you like. He's saying that each individual has each one of these 4 personality types within themselves, but actually tends to favor one more than the other. So he called them these. He called it, one of the personality types he talks about is the sanguine temperament. And he says it's traditionally associated with air. People with this temperament tend to be lively, sociable, carefree, talkative, and pleasure-seeking. They may be warm-hearted and optimistic. They can make new friends easily, be imaginative, artistic, and often have many, many ideas. They can be flighty and changeable. Sanguine personalities may struggle with the tasks all the way through and be chronically late or forgetful. Does that remind you of anybody in your life? I know I certainly, when I'm in that sanguine personality trait, which is quite strong with me, I can be all of those things. And some of my, excuse me, some of my old colleagues in the police service would tell you that I was fairly laid back. I could be late for meetings, and they used to call me Mr. Lastminute.com. So hey, they can be best reached through awakening their love for a subject or admiration of people. So that's how you get through to a sanguine person. A choleric person, and they're not very nice names, are they? But choleric person, the choleric temperament is traditionally associated with fire. People with this temperament tend to be egocentric, extroverted. They may be excitable, impulsive, restless, with reserves of aggression, energy, and or passion, and try to instill that in others. Now, in a very simplistic way, these are the people that I think are the focused people, the forceful, direct, challenging people, dominant or very action-orientated people. The melancholic temperament is traditionally associated with the element of earth. Hi AJ, how are you? Are you well? Good to see you, son. That's my nephew, guys. And Rachel, good to see you. So the melancholic temperament is traditionally associated with the element of earth. People with this temperament may appear serious, introverted, cautious, or even suspicious. They can be preoccupied with the tragedy and the cruelty in the world and are susceptible to the depression and moodiness. They may be focused and conscientious. They often prefer to do things themselves, both to meet their own standards and because they're not inherently sociable. They can be best met by awakening their sympathy for others. Now, these are your empathetic people, or empathic people. I'm not sure which is the right word there. They're concerned, they're informal, they're supportive, they have a strong love for other people, they're patient, and they're quite easygoing. Now, this is my strongest trait as a human being. My second trait is my yellow, or rather, I mentioned colours there, but I'm going to come on to colours in a short while. My sanguine personality is probably my second strongest. The final one that Hippocrates talks about is phlegmatic. The phlegmatic temperament is traditionally associated with water, and people with this temperament may be inward and private, thoughtful, reasonable, calm, patient, caring, and tolerant. They tend to have a rich inner life, seek a quiet, peaceful atmosphere and be content with themselves, and they tend to be steadfast, consistent in their habits, and thus steady and faithful friends. And their interest is often awoken by expressing others' interest in a subject. So they may appear somewhat ponderous sometimes or clumsy, and their speech may be slow or hesitant. So guys, so that's the real start, if you like, of the whole concept of human psychology, the whole concept of the personality traits that psychology then built upon. So we then move on to, and there's so many, to be honest, so many psychologists who've had a part to play in this, Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, who worked with Sigmund Freud, and I've done an awful lot of work around Carl Jung because as you know, I do a lot of personality profiling, so my work falls out of the stuff that Carl Jung did. And Carl Jung essentially came up with the same 4 personality traits, but actually broke them down into 12, then had an umbrella of 3 above the top. But essentially, he came up with 4 cardinal orientations, and check this similarity out. He says there are 4 cardinal personality orientations. So there are 4 groups, and within those 4 groups there's 3 in each group, so it makes up 12. But he said there's the ego fulfillment group, which is your choleric, your freedom group, which is your sanguine, your socialness group, which is your melancholic, and your order group, which is your phlegmatic. Why am I telling you all this? Because I'm hopefully going to try and explain why people are behaving and responding to situations that happen in the world the way they do. I use this in a very simplistic way. So I have 4 cards here. The 4 cards each represent a colour. Okay? So what I do is help you to understand what your personality preferences are, and which is your strongest, which is your weakest. Now here's the thing though, understanding this is knowing that while you have a stronger personality trait in one area, it does not mean that you only have that within your personality. You actually have each one of the 4. So for me, the ego fulfillment one is your red, your freedom one is your yellow, your socialness one is your green, that's me, and your order one is your blue. So your red is your focused, forceful, direct, challenging, dominant, action-orientated person. There were times in my life, and still are times in my life, where I've got a task in front of me that needs to be done, and I become very red to do that task. So it's not a bad trait, it's a good trait, but it will have downsides, like all the traits have downsides. I'm very fun-loving, when I'm in a party with people that I know, I can be very extroverted, but in a very bubbly kind of way. In a very bubbly kind of way. And that's my yellow. So I can be very talkative, expressive, light-hearted, sociable, flamboyant, enthusiastic. But here's my strongest. So the yellow would be my sanguine. My green is where my strongest is, and that's my social. That's the socialness one, or the melancholic. And that's me being very empathic, concerned, informal, supportive, patient, easygoing. My love for people is what drives my business and drives whatever I do, and that's because I'm a green. The blue is the order one, the phlegmatic, and that's the one that is very introverted, very analytical, very observing, very reflective, and cautious, and very formal and exacting. Now that's probably my lowest personality type, because I'm not a precise kind of person. I need to be sometimes, but I'm not. So here's the thing. What we're saying with these is, I'm sorry, I've made loads of notes, so I'm just going to read some out, is most people can identify with several archetypes within the personality construct. The point is not to identify with one and only one. The idea is that at the end of the day, one archetype will win out over the others. And when the hardest decisions, now this is the important thing, when the hardest decisions are being made, or when everything else seems to be stripped away, or when you're going through your strongest challenges, it's that archetype, the strongest one, that becomes your dominant one, that then influences the way you think, the way you behave, and how you respond to the situation. There's the point. You see, whatever happens in the world is not the issue. That is merely the stimulus. What happens in the world, whether it's Donald Trump being elected, whether it's we've got an earthquake here or we've got a war there, that is an issue in its own right, but it doesn't define you. It shouldn't define you. But the reason that it does define you is that when you're stripped away, Tony Robbins talks about his 6 human needs. 4 of those are physical and 2 of those are spiritual. When 2 of your physical needs, your human needs, are stripped away, you automatically resort to your strongest personality trait. Now, if you are a green, you are more likely to start getting really sad and start thinking about how much sadness there is in the world and, oh, what are people going to do? And this is really sad for the world. And, you know, you might feel like crying and get really, really upset. If you're a blue, you're more likely to get very analytical about it and say, okay, so let's look at the facts and figures here. What's the situation in America? How is he going to respond to the economy? What impact is he going to have on the world affairs, etc., etc. So you get very analytical about it, quite less emotive, more analytical. If you're in the red, you can get very challenging and very direct and very assertive and quite strong with your views. Now, the horrendous views, and the reason why I've done this Facebook Live today is because of some of the views that I have seen. I have seen 2 people on my timeline actually saying, I hope he gets assassinated or shot. Can that be right? Does that make you feel comfortable? You see, ordinarily these people going about their life, everyday life, would be very comfortable, would be very measured people, very balanced people. But an issue has arisen somewhere in the world. What have they done? They've resorted to their strongest personality type, which is red. They've become very forceful, direct, challenging, dominant, and action-orientated. The yellow people, however, would probably be saying things like, let's go and have a party. Let's have some fun. All right, even if I didn't agree with it, let's go and have a party now. You know what? I'm tired of this election. I'm going to let my hair down. I'm just going to party, man. So those are you yellow people. Okay? Can you see how there are different responses depending on what your strongest personality trait could be? So what do we do about it? How do we control our responses to events that happen around us, whether they're world events? Jane Jones says, sorry to interrupt, but what is the personality test you are doing with the cards? Jane, I do colour personality profiling based on the Jungian principles of psychology. I hope that makes sense. But in essence, it is all about finding out what your strongest personality trait is. Each personality has essentially 4 traits, 4 preferences, psychological preferences. You will have each one of these preferences inside of you all the time, but you will have one that is dominant and one that is your least preferred. The thing is, however, you can put yourself into any one of these states, any one of these personality preferences at any given time, depending on what you are faced with. All it takes is some conscious thinking for you to put yourself into that state. For example, I'm naturally an introvert. I'm a green. I'm empathic. I'm concerned. I'm very informal, supportive. But it's in the introverted category. Okay. But when I get on stage, I become a yellow. Sometimes on the stage, I become a red. That's when I'm saying to people, you need to take action. You need to do this to change your life. This is what you need to do. Take action right now. That's me being a red. When I'm on the stage and I'm trying to engage with people and I'm trying to pull people into my story, then I can be yellow. I'll be very, very flighty. I'm very humorous and bring the audience with me so I can serve them better. So that's your yellow. The thing is, however, when circumstances occur around you guys, our tendency is to go to our strongest personality preference because that's where we are most comfortable. That's where we have to spend the least amount of energy to be the person that we are at that moment in time. So what you could do whenever you are faced with that situation, whenever you're faced with any situation, is actually take a step back, have a breather, and do one of 2 things. You could either say to yourself this, okay, I'm going to go through the 4 colours now. I'm going to go through red, yellow, green, blue. What is my red saying about this situation? What would if my red was talking to me right now, what would it be saying to me? And your red might be saying, do you know what, I'm tired of this. I just want to go to sleep, or I just want to go to pub, or I just want to go for a meal, or I just want to go for a walk. What would your yellow be saying? I want to party. I want to go and ring some mates up. I want to ring some friends. I just want to hang out with them. I just want to have a laugh. I'm tired of all this nonsense. What would your green be saying? Your green would be saying, I just want more love in the world. I just want to hug people. I just want to bring more love about. I want to be a catalyst for change. Your blue would be saying, let me look at the facts. Before I make any decision, I want to look at the facts. What is going to be going on? How is it happening? Why is it happening? Who is doing it? So that will help you have a much more measured response going forward. Now, there's one final thing I'm going to share with you, and I've not done this for many years, but I've done this a few times back in the day, because I've always been interested in psychology and people and the philosophy of our thinking. But a guy called Edward de Bono wrote a book called The 6 Thinking Hats, and what he said was that I'm going to read it out because I've written it here. That the premise of the method of the 6 thinking hats is this: that the human brain thinks in a number of distinct ways which can be deliberately challenged and hence planned for use in a structured way, allowing one to develop tactics for thinking about particular issues. De Bono identifies 6 distinct directions in which the brain can be challenged. In each of these directions, the brain will identify and bring into conscious thought certain aspect of issues being considered. For example, gut instinct, pessimistic judgment, neutral facts. None of these directions are completely natural ways of thinking, but rather how some of us already represent the results of our thinking. Since the hats don't represent natural modes of thinking, each hat must only be used for a limited time. Also, some will feel that using the hats is unnatural, uncomfortable, or even counterproductive, and against their better judgment. But of course, everything is when you're first trying it for the first time. A compelling example presented is sensitivity to mismatch stimuli. This is presented as a valuable survival instinct because in the natural world, the thing that is out of the ordinary may well be dangerous. That's why we start feeling uncomfortable when we get out of our comfort zone into the growth zone. So the 6 thinking hats are these. What the premise is this: when you are faced with a situation that you feel you need to respond to, or you can feel an emotional response coming out of it, take that step back. You can do the exercise that I talked about with the colours. You know, think in a different way for each colour. What will that colour be telling you? Or you could do this, or in addition, you could do this. You could pretend that you are putting on a different coloured hat. And whatever you've got that different coloured hat on, you're going to ask yourself or think in a different way. And it's as simple as this, guys. You're going to think in the blue hat, which is, hi Mandip, the blue hat is your managing hat. And when you're in the blue hat, when you're wearing that, you'll say, what is the subject? What are we thinking about? What is the goal? Can I look at the big picture? Your white hat, your information hat, looks at nothing else but what information is available and what are the facts presented in front of us, and perhaps even what the gaps are in those facts. Your red hat is the emotions hat. That's when you can be intuitive and instinctive, and your gut reactions can come out, or statements of emotional feeling without any justification. Your discernment hat is your black hat, and when you have the black hat on, you apply logic to everything. You apply logic to identifying reasons to become cautious and conservative. So this is your cautious hat, okay? Your practical and realistic hat. Your yellow hat is your optimistic hat. A bit like the yellow cards. It's the hat that sees the brighter, sunny side of the situation. So when you're wearing your yellow hat, you're only going to allow yourself to think of the positive and think of what great things can come as a consequence of whatever response whatever stimuli you are responding to. And finally, the green hat. When you put your green hat on, those are your statements of provocation and investigation, seeing where a thought goes. So you're thinking creatively and out of the box. But you only need to wear these hats for a very limited period of time. But what I'm trying to do here is help you to start looking at situations around you in a much more different way, in a much more holistic way, in a much more measured way, and to prevent you from getting into that emotional side of the brain all the time. I don't know if you've read the book, The Chimp Paradox, where we talk about the human brain and we talk about the chimp in your brain. The chimp is the emotional aspect of your brain. So this is about taking ourselves out of the emotional part of our brain, not entirely, but from the majority, so we can look at a situation from varying different perspectives. A bit like a model that we use called the Johari's window. Johari's window essentially is saying there's an issue here. If this was a house with windows on all four sides, an issue here, if you were to look through each one of these windows, you'd see a different perspective. So guys, don't get emotional. Don't respond to what's going on in the United States elections with negative emotions, gut emotions, saying things that you're going to regret later on, doing things that you're probably going to regret later on. Think of it in the round. Understand that the reason you're feeling why you're feeling what you're feeling at this moment in time has got nothing to do with the elections. It's more about what personality preference type you're using at this moment in time. And you can adjust your strengths, your majority preference types as time goes on. But it's like anything else. It's like going to the gym. You have to exercise and you have to exercise and you have to exercise. And eventually you can change that and become a different personality type in the main. But remember, you've got green in you, you've got blue in you, you've got red in you, and you've got yellow in you. You are actually quite a balanced individual. But sometimes we act very imbalanced. Have a great day, guys. I need to shoot off to my meeting. Greg, I'm sorry. Good to see you, my brother. And guys, hope you have a pleasant rest of the day or evening. Bye-bye.